Hey y'all, Coaching the Fight here, talking about the Feast of the Lord. Now, if you have been catching our recent classes dealing with the Third Temple or New Jerusalem or the Rapture or anything like that, you know that we are approaching a very important season. That is the season which houses the fall feast days, talking about trumpets, the more Atonement Day, and tabernacles that fall in September and October. Well, these feast days are approaching very rapidly. And so we want to start doing classes on these days because not only do they have the normal significance of the Lord's feast, but we also believe that they are tied to the third temple, that New Jerusalem. And in one of our classes, we talked about how there could be a secret rapture, and how people could be somehow changed, as according to First Corinthians chapter 15 and First Thessalonians chapter 4. These people could be changed without anybody knowing about it. And if you jump over to Second Esdras chapter 2, you can see evidence of that. Amongst other places where it talks about how we are sealed at the Lord's feast, and in Revelation how it talks about how the Gentiles will trample the court for 3.5 years, and how over in the book of Daniel chapter 12 it talks about how Michael will stand up and then there will be great trouble. And Malachi in chapter 4, I mean, there's verse after verse that talks about these events and how they all seem to be tied to the Lord's feast. So we want to start doing more classes on that and bring some of this information out. Now, a few minutes ago, I was working on a class about an offering made by fire, and we're still, in the comment section of a few videos, trying to get a good understanding of what it means in 2020 for an offering made by fire. Because, we read over in Deuteronomy in chapter 12 and verse 10, how it seems as though the offerings of the Lord will come back. Talking about what you see in Leviticus, the first few verses of Leviticus. It seems like when we cross over River Jordan, those offerings are going to come back. And that's what we're talking about when we say things like New Jerusalem or the third temple. So if you will, if you know anything about the offerings made by fire, please, join us in the comment section as we work to put together that video to, educate ourselves on, what it means to make an offering made by fire. I bring all of that up because, a lot of these feast days have a requirement for an offering made by fire. And so we want to get this thing right, especially if we're talking about being sealed at this feast. I'm sure there's a requirement that we, get these things, these days right. So we want to acquire as much information on them as we can. All right. Well, anyway, let's jump and get into this class talking about the Feast of the Lord. I found this as I was preparing that class about offerings, and something jumped out at me, and I thought I might share it with you guys. We are on a new moon day. This is what day is this? This is August the 20th. So this is a new moon day. Of course, the inner courts are open now, so we can expect revelations from our Father during these days. That is the importance of paying attention to the new moon days and the Sabbath days, is because one of the things that happens is these are the days that we get revelations. We're in the spirit communication with our Father, and this is a good download day. And so one of the things that he's been downloading to me is about these feast days. And so I want to show you guys this. All right, now, for those of you who are new to this old, I don't know what to call it, biblical world. There's a lot of people coming on a channel. They're telling us how they aren't involved in any religions. They aren't part of any churches. They talked about how they have never read their Bible or anything, but they all of a sudden feel inclined to study the Father's word, and so they're pretty green and they're pretty new. Let me just show you guys that there are actually 7 feasts total. In the spring, you have Passover, unleavened bread, and first fruits feast. Those fall in the first biblical month. It usually starts right around March, sometimes in April. And then you have the 4th feast, which is Pentecost. Now, we believe that these first 4 feasts have been fulfilled in biblical prophecy. They are holy convocations. They are holy days that they do every year, but it is understood that they have futuristic prophecies all tied to them. You may have heard already how the Messiah was the Passover lamb, and how his being crucified on the cross typified the Passover feast being fulfilled. Well, we also know that that week that he spent there in the spirit world was kind of the unleavened bread period. And then on that 8th day, he came and he talked to his disciples as the first fruits. So all of this, we believe has been fulfilled, as well as Pentecost. Now, there's 2 points in history that we could point to as far as Pentecost. There was the event that took place in the book of Acts, where the Holy Spirit came and descended on the people there who were celebrating the Feast of Pentecost. But then when you look throughout history and look at the 364-day calendar as it corresponds to the years, a day equals a year, you look in 1884 and you can see that the 3rd testament of the Bible was revealed to mankind. I know that's a lot in that sentence there, but check some of our other videos and maybe even the description of this video so you can see what we're talking about the 3rd testament of the Bible. In chapter 1, it kind of tells you all that I'm talking to you about. That too fell on Pentecost too. I just wanted to bring that note out. But in this class, we want to talk about the fall feast. You have Trumpets, or the memorial blowing of trumpets, the Feast of Atonement Day, and Tabernacles. These are the feasts that fall in the 7th month. Now, we can't really point to anything that has fulfilled the Feast of Tabernacles yet. That feast will, when it is fulfilled, we will enter what's called the millennial age, the age of rest. There will be a 1,000-year period that will start at whenever this Feast of Tabernacles is fulfilled. I personally believe it's going to be tied to that great earthquake that we hear about that's going to shake down every building, every wall, every idol on the planet, even decimating some continents of the planet, that we hear about in scripture over there. That one, we don't know that there has been a fulfillment, as well as Atonement Day. Now, whereas Tabernacles is with Israel in the millennial age, that age of rest, Atonement Day is about the atonement of Israel, kind of cleansing away of their sins and that kind of thing. We haven't seen any type of fulfillment, materialistic manifestation of that event take place yet either. We haven't seen that either. But this one over here, the memorial of blowing of trumpets, I don't know. Have we seen something on it? We can look back at the Revelations 12 sign in the sky, which actually occurred on the memorial of blowing of trumpets. You have to know how our Father's calendar works. It's not like man's calendar, and it's not like man's day either. Man's day starts at sun up or at 12 o'clock midnight or something like that. Our Father's Day starts at sundown, so they kind of overlap. And when you look at it really closely, you can see that the Revelations 12 sign in the sky actually fell right there at the memorial of blowing of trumpets in the year 2017. Now, was that the material manifestation of the memorial of blowing of trumpets? It's kind of hard to say. You know, a lot of people believe it is. You know, if I had to answer it on a question, on a test, you know, and I only had two answers, yes and no, I would go and I would say yes. That was the fulfillment of the memorial of blowing of trumpets. But, you know, I'd be crossing my fingers hoping I got that answer right, because I'm not absolutely sure. We can put that in the comment section if you know, believe something differently on that. But anyway, this is what I wanted to bring out to you guys. First of all, let's jump over and look at this section right here. This is talking about the interval between the Feast of Pentecost and the Fall Feast. If we back up a little bit, you see how they kind of lump those first four feasts together there, and then there's kind of a break there in the middle, where there is no feast. It fallen in the 4th, 5th, and 6th month. So they're calling it the long interval. Now, this document that I'm looking at comes from Clarence Larkin's charts that you will find in his book called Dispensational Truth. I actually found this document on Google. I simply went in and searched for Feast of the Lord Clarence Larkin in the image section of Google, and it appeared there, and I downloaded it to this little device here, and I'm able to show it to you guys here. So, well, I'm saying all of that to say, if you want to check out this chart, go over to Google and just type in Feast of the Lord Clarence Larkin, and you'll see this one. And you could probably find all of those charts that he has over there. He has good charts on Revelation, good charts on the Exodus and Leviticus, even Genesis. He did a good job of breaking out those books and putting them in a pictorial form, a diagram that we can actually follow and read. Well, here he's talking about the long interval. Let me just read this. He says, between the Feast of Pentecost and the Feast of Trumpets typifies the present dispensation in which the Holy Spirit is gathering out the elect of God, the church. So this is talking about the period between the time that our Christ was crucified way back there in, you know, about 30 AD until we get to the beginning of the millennial age. I hesitate on when I say that because it's hard to say when that grace period ends. Does it end at the beginning of the so-called tribulation, or does it end at the end of the tribulation? You know, that could be as long as 7 years. It's at least 3.5 years. That could be at least a 7-year difference. But we know it's during that period that Israel is scattered. Israel, back then with the Messiah, you know, we were talking about a fleshly Israel. These people had blood ties. You know, they looked like Israel. They had all of the physical traits of Israel. They were walking around with the Messiah. All of that. But what has happened since then is you have the reincarnated spirits. I'm going to go ahead and say it. There's a lot of people who are choking on reincarnation, but you really need to study how our Bibles was changed. Our Bibles was changed. I'm going to say it a third time. Our Bibles was changed. They went in and took the word reincarnation out and replaced it with the word resurrection. We're talking about the Catholic Church. The same people that changed the 10 Commandments, that tried to change the Lord's Prayer, that changed the Sabbath day, actually changed the Bible to say resurrection when it was supposed to say reincarnation. And so that's why people are getting ready for what I call a zombie apocalypse. They're ready for dead people to come up out of the ground. That's what resurrection means. Dead people rising up. So I guess they're, you know, hanging around grave sites waiting for their loved ones to come back to life or whatever. No, that's what the Catholic Church did to our Bibles. Reincarnation is different. And if you think about it, reincarnation feels better to you when you, in our spirits, when we think about it. I mean, we understand that our spirits is not going to die. You know that when your body dies, do you really expect that your spirit will become nothingness and you won't exist anymore? Or do you think that you're actually going to, you know, live on even after your body perishes? That's really easy to understand. And the way that works is through reincarnation. After we die, we'll go into the spirit world and spend some time there in kind of a respite period before we come back to earth, being reincarnated into a new person, a baby, and we get to start a whole new life, with the same spirit. The spirit lives forever. We'll have the same spirit. We don't really remember, our spirits, in the past lives or anything like that. But, it we are reincarnated to these new beings. All right. Now, what we're talking about here is the interval between the fall feasts and the spring feast. And let's see, it got a little bit distracted here, but let me go on. It says the Feast of Trumpets, summoning Israel back to their own land, refers to the time when God will resume his relations with Israel. See, they got scattered when the temple was destroyed. Now, that's part of that class that I was doing earlier on the feast days, because I'm kind of thinking, did the offerings only stop because they destroyed the temple? I mean, there's nothing, the Messiah never told us to stop the offerings, and they continued making offerings in the temple until Rome invaded those guys over there. Well, and like we talked about a few minutes ago, Deuteronomy and my page, Deuteronomy and chapter 12 talks about how the offerings will continue one day. And so I think that's important. But anyway, when we come over here to the memorial of blowing of trumpets. Now, first of all, you see how it is New Year's Day, it says here, according to Clarence Larkin. And this is true. It is the 7th month, but we are told that it was the beginning of the year in Scripture. And a lot of ways it's considered the New Year's celebration, talking about the first day of the 7th month. Now, you can read about this day over there in Leviticus chapter 23, starting in verse 23. You could read about the memorial of blowing of trumpets. But notice how that part right there where it says regathering of Israel. So this is important when we're talking about the new covenant, New Jerusalem, third temple, and all of that. Because isn't that what the New Jerusalem will be? It's not a regathering of Israel. That's exactly what it's going to be. It's going to be the regathering of our Father's people, not in physical Jerusalem over there in the Middle East. We're talking about the New Jerusalem. That third temple will be built on the hearts of humanity. So the question is does this building of the third temple, does this construction period correspond to the memorial of blowing of trumpets? I really think it does. Even if you point back to 2017 and look at the Revelations 12 sign in the sky and how our Father, go over and read Revelations chapter 12, and you'll see how he led his people out into the wilderness, which is similar to what happened back there in Egypt when Moses led the people into the wilderness, where they went out and learned the laws, learned the rules, learned the covenant, and different things they needed to know in order to live with our Father. Well, I believe that's what happened in 2017. But like I said, I'm not absolutely sure. This actually could be pointing to the year 2020. Now, I say that because of what you read over there in the book of Daniel in chapter 12 and how it points to the year 2020. Just remember that the daily sacrifice was taken away in 606 BC, and then add those days that Daniel was talking about, the 1,290 days, I believe he said, remembering that there was no year zero, so you have to add an additional year that takes you to 685, and then you add the 1,335 years after that, and you end up with the year 2020. So could this memorial of trumpets, could this regathering of Israel take place in the year 2020? Those would be my two guesses, either 2017 or the year 2020. You say, well, why am I bringing this information to you guys? Well, because like I said earlier, there's a lot of new believers who are starting, to take notice of spiritual things. And this is one of the things that they really should be paying attention to, is the memorial of blowing of trumpets, along with the Sabbath day. Of course, you should start keeping a Sabbath day today. Work 6 days and take off a rest day, a day that you will rest unto the Lord and spend some time with Him without any work, without any buying or selling, or there's a few rules associated with the Sabbath day. But you start keeping the Sabbath day. That's the first thing. That's the first thing he did in Israel over there. And then you start keeping the feast days. And the next feast day coming up is the memorial of blowing of trumpets. And so the new guys, even the old guys, the ones that's been with the Lord for a number of years, they're going to do it automatic. This is something we do every year without missing. But, for the new guys, really need to be paying attention as to, this feast day. Let me read it right here, see what it says. It says, Israel is to be gathered back to their own land. And I'm sorry, the words are really small here and I'm having trouble seeing them. Apparently that's in Jeremiah chapter 16, verse 14 and 15. I really can't see that. But we're talking about their own land. And don't be materialistic thinking that he's talking about Jerusalem in the Middle East. I promise you he's not. He's talking about a spiritual land. He's talking about the new Jerusalem, which is to be built on our hearts. And that's to be wherever it is that you're at, wherever it is that he leads you to. And that's the land that he's talking about. That's where we will be gathered back together. So don't be, trying to buy you a ticket over there to the Middle East. You don't really want to be there. Far as I understand, the way I understand it, that rock that is supposed to come down and destroy all of the economic systems of the world. Well, it seems to me that rock actually falls on the Temple Mount over there in Jerusalem. So don't be running over there thinking that that's where you're going to be gathered to. I don't really believe you want to. Armageddon is supposed to take place over there. And it seems like the end of Armageddon comes with a huge earthquake or a nuclear bomb or something like that just destroys everything over there. So that's not the Jerusalem that he's talking about, that when he says that we will be gathered back to our own land, he's talking about New Jerusalem. There's some more verses there. Hope you guys can see them because I really can't. Isaiah 11, Amos chapter 9, I can see that, verse 14 and 15. He says, we are told in Matthew chapter 24, verse 29 through 31, that they are to be summoned by angelic trumpeters. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. And we're talking about them being summoned by angelic trumpeters. Now, is this trumpeting going to happen on the memorial of blowing of trumpets? Could it have happened back there in 2017? Well, if you're new, then obviously it didn't happen back there in 2017. So is this something that can take place every year? I actually believe so. I believe this is the paths or that to dwell in that you read about over there in Isaiah in chapter 58. I think this right here, what we're looking at, is a roadmap back to the good graces of our Father. This is a roadmap to the kingdom of heaven. What does it say? What does it say over there in Isaiah chapter 58? Restorers of the breach, repairers of the path to dwell in. This path, I believe, goes through Leviticus chapter 23. In other words, let me just see if I can put this in plain English. What I think, I believe that you take a person who knows nothing about the Lord whatsoever, never read a Bible, never been to a church, never, heard a sermon, anything. You have just this person who's just walking around. All of a sudden, he's somehow convinced that he wants to be with the Father. And he says, what do I do? Well, like I said, I believe it goes to Leviticus 23, starting first of all with the Sabbath day, and then it will go through the feast days. He will start on the Sabbath day. And if he's in that season, of course, he would start with Passover. But since we're in the fall season or getting ready for the fall season, he would start with the memorial of blowing of trumpets. The first thing that will happen, that will be part of his regathering there. And then after the regathering, after he becomes spiritual Israel, then you have the atonement process, followed by the millennial rest. Now, it's a little bit disjointed. I guess I should have started over there in Passover or whatever, start off with the Passover feast or whatever, and I didn't because we're in this season or whatever. But it's still, I still believe that that's the road that it goes. Maybe it starts in Passover and goes through unleavened bread or whatever. But that brings me to my other point. If it did start, if this blowing of trumpets did start over there in 2017, then you have the 1,260 days of that Revelations talk about. Well, that if it started in 2017, that would bring you to the spring feast of 2021. It like almost puts you right on top of the spring feast of 2021. So you have people like me who kind of started this journey around Tabernacles time, and then once we have performed what I believe the Messiah was calling an acceptable day of the Lord, which, you know, to me sounds like he's saying that we actually keep every one of these feast days. You know, you keep the feast days for the entire year. There will be an acceptable day of the Lord, or an acceptable year of the Lord. And then, you know, you become one of his children. We are sealed at his feast, according to like what it says over there in Second Esdras and chapter 2. But anyway, so I just wanted to bring that out to you guys. I plan on doing more classes on this. I just wanted to show you this one, how the memorial of blowing of trumpets, the Feast of Trumpets as they call it, is the regathering of Israel. Now it should sound pretty important to you, because, you know, this is what we're talking about when people use words like rapture or the Great Awakening or nirvana, or all of these things that, you know, our spirit is supposed to, you know, awaken to this higher level of awareness. You know, this is what we're talking about, you know, the new covenant. So we really need to be paying attention to this feast day. There are some requirements that we have to do on the day. Like, for instance, we're not allowed to do servile work, or, you know, and we have to make an offering made by fire, which is kind of where this all started for me here today. But, you know, we'll cover more on that as we move along. And we'll cover more on these days like Atonement Day and Israel's millennial rest, which all falls on or in the 7th sacred month. All right, so go ahead and hit that subscribe button or that bell notification button so you can see when those classes come out. Just wanted to get this one up really quickly. Sorry for not editing it or whatever, but, you know, I'm trying to get out of class every day, you know, something that you guys could use every day, mainly because I think we're getting close to these times here, and I think there's a lot of information that needs to be, you know, gotten out, you know. So please excuse me for, you know, the lack of quality in these videos, but if you did get something out of it, go ahead and hit the like button. If you didn't, hit the dislike button, but pray that I get better at it. And Godspeed and shalom.